let's try it. I mean, I'm also trying it for the first time. Okay. So Java or Kotlin?
Kotlin.
Okay. Your one favorite library in Android? Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, MTechViral, and here today I have a very special guest, Antonio, with us, and he's the Kotlin expert. You might be knowing or you might not be knowing him, but he's a very popular guy in the Kotlin world. He's certified by JetBrains. So I would like to introduce Antonio. So Antonio.
Hi, thanks for having me. And it's a pleasure to be here today with you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure for us as well, and we are really feeling honored to have you on this channel. And I don't know if you know about it or not, but I actually mailed you like a couple of years ago that I want this particular PDF of your one book, and at that time I didn't know you as a person, and now we are here, and I feel really lucky about it. He is the expert in Kotlin, certified by JetBrains, and Google also recommends his courses. So before going further, I just want to tell people that what's Kotlin. So Kotlin is basically a language for Android. It's a product of JetBrains. Then it was named on Kotlin Island, if I'm not wrong, which is in Russia, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
So in 2017, Google made Kotlin the first class language for Android, and now in 2019 I/O they said that the Kotlin is the preferred language for Android. So that's about Kotlin. Now, before we proceed with the entire interview, I just want to tell you that it's divided into a few parts. So first will be the introduction section, where you will introduce yourself. Then the second will be career path option, where we'll talk about different paths which people should take. And then the third one will be the questions asked by the audience on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter on my social media accounts. And the fourth one will be an interesting one, where you have to answer quick answers of like in one word of all these questions, like there are 10 questions. So should we start?
Yeah, let's do it.
The first one is the intro. So about my story with Kotlin is that when I started, not many people were doing it. So I started back in 2016 with Kotlin. So at that time, Google didn't announce Kotlin as the first class language for Android. And I also produced some videos in 2017 January, I guess. And then I didn't get so much response for it. So and that's how I started with Kotlin, and I personally liked Kotlin a lot. So I would like to know what's your journey of programming, and like about whatever you have been doing.
So I finished my degree. I did computer science here in Spain, and I finished it like 11 years ago. And at that point, I started working in one of the first companies when I did an interview, and it was nothing related to Android. It was more related to Microsoft technologies, and I wrote C# at that point. But at some point I didn't feel very good about what I was doing. I didn't feel very passionate. So I started checking other technologies. I did some web, and at some point I decided to try Android. And because it was very easy to access, it was cheaper than other options like iOS, for instance, where you had to buy an expensive device, an expensive laptop, and all that. So at the very beginning, I started trying it and playing with it. It was so fun, and I enjoyed it so much that I couldn't stop learning. I fell in love with it, and since then, I even started writing a blog and writing articles. And at some point, 1 year later or so, I could start doing this professionally. So that's how I started doing Android development.
And one more thing I want to ask is about your job. So are you working somewhere, or it's just producing content online?
Mhm. I worked for a company until last September, so 1 year ago, more or less. And nowadays I'm focused 100% on my project, which is uh, training freelancing. I'm a freelance trainer, and I go to companies to do coding training, and also have an online course, the book you mentioned. So nowadays I'm 100% focused on that.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. So the third thing I want to know is about your certification, like you are certified with JetBrains and all that. So what's the story behind it?
Yeah, so the short story is in fact really short. I just contacted them when I realized that they were doing this this training this training partnership, and we talked, and I joined. But the long story is a little bit longer, because to access to that partnership you need to prove that you know Kotlin. There are some tests that you need to pass, and also the content that you create, the courses and all that need to be validated by JetBrains. So as my book was the first book in Kotlin in general, not only in Kotlin for Android, I've always been in contact from time to time with JetBrains, because they also wanted that this book was good enough, because there wasn't any other source at that point. So they reviewed the whole book, and I've also been, as I mentioned, I've been in contact with them for different things. And when this moment, when I found out that they were doing this thing, I just contacted them. And in my case, of course, as they already knew about me and about my progress, it was not that difficult to get in.
That's pretty nice. So tell us more about the Kotlin for Android devs. So that's pretty interesting topic for me, because I have read one of the ebooks available, and I find it very interesting because of the way the book has been structured. So now there is some online video courses as well. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I had the idea when I started learning coding, which in fact was at the beginning of 2015, because I watched a talk of some people doing Android apps but using Scala, not coding at that point. That it was at some point where there was like this question whether Scala or Kotlin should be used to develop Android apps, and I found it like very heavy, the language, to use it inside a device, and it has proved to be like that in the future. But I had also read at that point a document that Jake Wharton released. It was first written internally for the previous company, but he then decided to publish it, and it was about why he thought that Kotlin was the best language to develop Android apps. So at the very first moment that I watched that talk, I decided to start trying Kotlin. That same night I started to try things, and I became uh, so passionate about it, and I enjoyed it so much that I had to show it to the world. And that's when I started writing articles, and the idea of the book came up very fast, because for some time I wanted to write a book, and this was the perfect topic. So yeah, that's how I started writing it, and the way of explaining it that you mentioned, that is like very casual, because I create an app and keep explaining the concepts on it. It was because I wanted to make it as easy as possible, removing all the theory and all that you can find in any pages, or even in the reference of the language, and going straight to the point to understand the concepts and start applying them on a real app. So that's my philosophy behind all the content and all the courses that I do, and it's also the same the way that I use in my online course and in the trainings that I do for companies. So I always keep the same essence on it.
So basically, you have been doing it to make it more enjoyable to actually understand and to have the basic idea that how we should approach for learning Kotlin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So apart from that, what's exactly your vision about all these courses and the architect coders, if I'm not wrong? That's the thing which you have been doing. So what's the motivation and what's the vision?
The motivation is because I've always loved to teach what I learn. When I learn something, I have to go through this process of understanding things in a very deep way, and then when I have that knowledge, I find the need to explain it, but in a much simpler way. I always try that the things that I explain are really, really simple, so that anyone approaching to that thing the first time can understand it very easily and without all the pain I've been into to learn it. So that's the motivation of all these courses and all my content, to make the life of other developers easier, thanks to the steps that I already taken, so that they don't have to take them again.
I guess you're talking about the pain of the Eclipse, if I'm not wrong, because I started with Eclipse, right? Okay, so moving to the second part where we are gonna talk about career path. So I would like you to give some advice to our audience of this channel that what career path they should follow. So that's my first question, that what do you think that what should be the career path if someone wants to be a developer or want to do something in the tech industry?
I've talked to several people about this, and it depends a little on the country, to be honest, because for instance, I kind of recommend that if you don't have a clear path, you study a career about it. But for instance, someone from Canada told me that I have to pay three 30,000 in dollars to do my career, and then I need to pay this for the rest of my life. So if I'm passionate enough, I can do it on my own. But here in Spain, for instance, the studies are public and are affordable to anyone. So the situation is a little bit different. But in general, if it's possible and you are not very sure, I would try to do some kind of degree in the universities of your country. And if it's not affordable for everyone, then I would go for online content. There are many universities nowadays that give this kind of the same you do in a degree. You can do it for free in several universities around the world. So it can be a good start if you still don't are not sure how to start developing, but because it's a lot of work at the beginning. And once you have learned a little about the basics, I would decide which is the kind of projects that I would like to develop. If you want to become an Android developer, then there are also some free content from Google, for instance. There are several courses that are useful. And if you want another kind of path, then investigate on that area, because there are many free contents to start. And then once you have it clear, maybe you could start considering investing in some more regulated education or some online courses of people you rely on that can help you go a step further. And that would be basically it. Then in terms of how to become a little more successful, I would try to stand out in some way. For instance, doing a YouTube channel like you did, or writing articles as I did at the beginning. Things that when you reach to an interview, you can show your knowledge without the people that are interviewing you having to rely on your work, but you already have things on the internet that show that you have some knowledge about it and that you are going to provide a good job to the company.
That's great.
So,
and what do you think should be the approach to learn any programming language? Let's say Kotlin. What approach you should take?
I would try, if possible, I would go for something that is well structured, rather than going to the internet and start to read all the amount of articles that are out there and all that. I will try to go for something more structured. There are some contents that are free and some others that are paid, and depending on your possibilities, I would go for one way or another. But in my opinion, if you want to take the most out of your time, I recommend that to use something that is structured and that goes and takes you from the beginning to the end without having you to find out which is the best path to do it.
Yeah, and like I have seen this question so many times, and even when I am giving talk to many places, so then also people ask me this question that these days there are a lot of competition. There are a lot of programming languages to learn. So should we learn multiple languages altogether, or should we focus on only a single language? Let's say if I'm doing Java from a long time now, should I switch to Kotlin, or should I continue with Java only? So what's your view about learning multiple languages because of the competitive world we are living in?
In my opinion, learning a new language is always a very good experience because you're going to learn a lot of different concepts that the previous languages lacked, and especially if we are writing Java, when moving to Kotlin, to put the typical example and Andre developer goes, there are many concepts that don't exist in Java because it's a much older language that they do in Kotlin. For instance, things like immutability, the nullability, or the optionals, or things about functional programming, and all these things that in Java don't exist really, and that when moving to Kotlin you will learn them and then even apply them to other languages like Java. I always say that when I learned Kotlin, even my way of writing Java code changed because I started being more aware about nulls and more aware about the immutability and the things that I know that are not going to change. Then in Java you can mark them as final, for instance. These are things that I weren't worried about when I was writing Java code, and after learning Kotlin, my way of writing Java changed. So learning new languages is always good in that term, that you open your mind to new ideas and new concepts. But I also wouldn't be worried about learning everything. Of course, if you have time to do that, it's great, but we'll have very limited time. So focus on a modern language that solves your problems right now, because then moving to another language will be easier, and then become an expert on that, because it's easier to stand out from the rest if you are expert in something that if you know many things but not very deeply. So my recommendation is always that if you can, you specialize in something.
What do you think that if there are many things happening in the Android world, so how people should stay updated, because there are a lot of announcements happening every time and a lot of things happening every day. There is something new. So what's your view about that?
Yeah, that's something I'm talking about very soon, exactly because I'm doing a keynote at DroidCon Lisbon, and this is the exact topic that I'm talking about. So you nailed it here with this question. And in my opinion, we shouldn't focus so much on learning libraries and all the new things that new libraries provide us, and we should focus more on learning how to write quality code, which is something that doesn't change so much, and that it's also transferable to different technologies. For instance, things like the solid principles or the architectural patterns, architectures, testing, all these things that provide your code with good quality, and that mean that the base code that you write can be easy to evolve and to maintain. And this is something that makes you a good developer, a good software developer, and not only Android developer. And that won't change so fast and is more easy to accomplish. Then learning new libraries, you will probably learn them when you need them. It's enough to know that they are there and they exist. And at the moment that you need them, you can go deeper into them and find out how they solve your problems. But I will focus more on the first part and less on knowing all the details of the frameworks or all the libraries that appear. But for instance, I took a screenshot of the new releases of the libraries of the Jetpack libraries that were released tonight, I think, and there were like 10 or 11 new updates of the library. So it's impossible to know how many things have changed on all those libraries. It's we don't have time to do that in our day-to-day. So, and that's what I recommend in these days, that we focus more on the foundation of software development and on writing good code rather than knowing everything that is released every day.
That's correct. And there is one more thing, which is like, a lot of people are trying to learn so many things, like they are working 24 hours for that only. So what's your view about having that balanced lifestyle, let's say, how to actually have that work-life balance? Because I think both of the things are important, the work as well as your family and friends. So what's your view on that?
Yeah, I think that we need to try that balance. But I also see that we as developers go through different stages in our career, and at some point we are in that situation, the one that you mean, that you said, that we need to learn everything and we need to be up to date with all the new things that appear, and this cannot be maintained during a lot of time, because it's impossible to be up to date and be spending the 24 hours per day to learn and to work and all that. So at some point we need to compartmentalize our life and decide which part of our day we want to devote to learning, which part to work, and which part to our free time, our family, our friends. So what I usually recommend to do that is that if you are going to work at and not very soon time of the day, for instance, you start at 9 or something like that, you can get up a little earlier and devote 1 or 2 hours in the morning before that to learn, then go to work, and when you arrive home, try to have some rest and recover for the next day. And that way you can keep progressing, obviously not as fast as if you spend the whole day, but I think that we also need to oxygenate our brain, because otherwise we cannot retain what we are learning. So yeah, I would do something like that. It's what I did when I had a regular job, and nowadays I try to follow the same thing. And at some time I stop and I spend the rest of the day with my family.
That's great. So let's move to the next part, where I'm going to ask few questions which people want to know about Kotlin and Android. So the first question which I got is from Shehzad Afridi on LinkedIn. He asked this question, that should Android developer who code in Java transfer to Kotlin? And there are same questions coming from Sundaram on LinkedIn, Robin on Twitter, Balram Kukureja on Facebook, that what do you think about what's the comparison between Kotlin and Java? And because both are fixing a problem, so what programming language we should learn? So it's basically more about transferring from Java to Kotlin, and what's your view about both of the languages?
If we only think about our career progression and don't think about what language is better or worse, now Google has announced that as you mentioned, that Android is Kotlin first. So if we want to keep developing our careers as Android programmers, we are going to need it in our day-to-day. So nowadays it's a must to learn it. Maybe you are not using it today in your current company, but in 6 months you may need it for a new project in your company, or you move to another one and they are using it. So I think it's inevitable today to learn coding if you are an Android developer. But if we move to the pros of using Kotlin as opposed to Java, it's a little bit of what I already mentioned, that Kotlin is a much more modern language. It has well thought from its inception, so many of the problems that the Java language had have been solved in Kotlin, and also brings many other features that that Java doesn't have, and that are very helpful if you want to move from one language to another. You will probably have heard that Swift and Kotlin are very similar, and that's because they both are using all the ideas of the new languages. If you move to Scala, for instance, even if Scala is a much bigger language, many of the concepts exist there too. And if you move to Ruby, I did some Ruby, and it was kind of easy to move from Kotlin because, again, they are using many similar concepts that we have in all modern languages. But Java lacks those concepts, so I think it's very interesting to know a modern language to be able to move easily from one language to another.
That's correct. The second question is from Sundaram K on LinkedIn, as well as Satyam Gondhale, that why Kotlin Native and what's its scope and how effective it is.
So Kotlin Native is a variant of Kotlin. At the beginning, for the ones who don't know, at the beginning Kotlin only ran on the Java virtual machine, so you need a device that can run that machine. And at some point they decided that they wanted to not depend on any virtual machine and be able to run everywhere where the Kotlin team decided to support. And that's when Kotlin Native appeared. Kotlin Native allows to run Kotlin in many devices, for instance, in a Raspberry Pi or even in an iOS device. And this is because they are running natively on the platform where the code is deployed. So this, together with Kotlin Multi-Platform, which is another project of the Kotlin team that allows to share modules between different variants of Kotlin, this allows us that we can share the base code of our projects between different platforms. For instance, we could have a project running in Kotlin JVM, another one in Kotlin Native, and another one in Kotlin JS, which is another variant that runs on web. It's for front end, and we could have the code that is common to all them extracted to a module that then all of them can use. So I think that for the future is a very interesting technology. It's currently in alpha state. I think the multi-module and the native in beta or something like that. I don't remember exactly right now. So for the future, it can solve the problem of multi-platform, but in a middle step. Instead of doing everything for each platform or having only just one code and deploy it everywhere, like things like that other platform technologies like Flutter or React Native try to do, they stay in the middle. You do most of your code shared, but then to do the part of the UI and all that, you rely on the platform, on the specific platforms. So I think it can be very interesting for companies who could have all their base code written in Kotlin and then share this code into the different apps that they have.
Okay, so that's where my next question is that what's your view on Flutter and Dart?
My view is that it's and probably you can help me better here because I don't know much about Flutter, but my view is that it's very good for some situations and not so good for others. I see it very powerful for companies, for instance, that are a little low on budget and um, cannot afford having one Android developer and another iOS developer, and they want to try the market with a new app. It's I think much easier to develop a Flutter app that works on both platforms and publish it, and then depending on how it goes and if they need to do very specific platform things, they could in the future or decide to do native apps for each one, or then in the end they probably will need to hire some Android and iOS developers to do the parts that are more specific to the platform and that cannot be resolved by Flutter. But what I'm seeing a lot is that many Android developers are worried because Flutter could destroy native development, and I don't think honestly that this is going to happen, because at the end, there are many things that are very specific to each platform and that cannot always be solved with a generic solution. But again, I don't know much about Flutter, so I don't know if you have a different perspective of it, and I would love to hear it.
Yeah, no, I have the same idea about it. I can recommend people the Flutter to everyone, but then if it's, let's say, if someone is working on maybe an IoT product or something which is very specific to the hardware, let's say specifically for Android, then at the end they have to write the separate code for Android and iOS. So if your whole idea is based on that, then obviously I will always prefer to go native rather than going to any cross-platform. Whether it is Flutter, React Native, or whatever. But now, because of the progress which I have seen with Flutter, it's for most of the use cases it's been going very good, and I have been using it a lot in my company as well as for other projects as well, some freelancing projects as well. So it's been so far so good, and I think the idea is I like the idea, to be honest. The overall architecture of Android, I think if Android would have if they get a chance to rewrite it from scratch, then maybe they will choose the same idea. And I kind of like the declarative UI pattern style, because that's I think the next step going forward, because now because we have something like Jetpack, Compose UI, Swift UI, so all those things are at the right place. And I don't know what will happen in the future, but definitely it's gonna be very much interesting. And I think whatever people are learning, it's gonna be useful at the end. It's nothing like you are losing something. It's like you are gaining a lot of things. So it's going to be tough to answer this question, I know. So let's move to the next question. This is question from Way for Best Way on Twitter. Any game engine like Unity 3D adopted Kotlin, or how to develop games using Kotlin? I mean, he's saying that some complex games, not simple ones.
I honestly don't know any gaming platform that are using it, because I'm not much into that world either, so I don't have much information in this one, to be honest. If there's a platform that uses Java, you can use Kotlin, of course, but other than that, I don't think that there's any specifically written for Kotlin.
Yeah, that's fine. There's one more question from the same guy. How to save code or business logic from reverse engineering? C and C++ are good for reverse engineering. Is there any framework we can expect from Kotlin engineers which can, help from reverse engineering or something like that? I guess that's the question.
I think that currently there's not anything, because at that moment when you reverse engineer an app that is written in Kotlin, the code that it will show is in Java, so the code is not the same, and it will probably even more difficult to understand that if it was written in Java. But at this moment, I don't think there's anything either.
Okay. And so next question is from Masoom Ahmed on Twitter. When can we expect a stable release of Jetpack Compose UI kit? I'm not sure whether you know about it.
No, nobody knows it. In fact, I listened to a podcast to one of the members of that team, and they don't know it either. They will release it when it's ready, and that's they are not rushing on it. So they prefer to have something stable rather than rushing and doing something that they are not happy with. So there are no estimated dates yet.
Yeah, it's total guess. I mean, I also think like maybe next I someone will get only the alpha or beta of it, something like that.
They
It's
try to
gonna take
release
some time.
something more usable, but probably we won't be ready for the next IO, and maybe for the next one for
Yeah,
2021 we have something.
maybe we don't know yet, right? So another question is from Yash Chen. So he want to ask that Java code is like more LOC, which is line of code, as compared to Kotlin code. But I think that code written in Java is more understandable than Kotlin. And is there any updates going on for in terms of code understandability for Kotlin? I mean, what his means is like the code which we are writing in Kotlin is like little bit complex as compared to Java in terms of understanding it. So what's your view
I
about that?
think the language is as it is. In my opinion, once you learn one or two things, the code becomes
Yeah.
easier to understand because it's simpler. But at the beginning, if you don't know the new features of the language, it can be a little more complex. But in general, I don't think that the way to write coding is going to change in any short term. They have their features already added, and they don't want the language to grow indiscriminately. So I wouldn't expect any big changes in the coding language as itself. I expect more changes in what we talked before, Kotlin Native, Kotlin multi-platform, and these kind of things. But I wouldn't expect many big changes in the rest of in the base of the language.
Okay. Yeah, that's the point. Next question is from Abhinav Prakash on Facebook, that how much time it will take to become Android developer by using Kotlin for beginner level, intermediate level, and expert level. So is there any time criteria for that? I'm not sure.
If you already know to write Android apps using Java, moving to Kotlin is very simple indeed, because for instance, to put some numbers, when I do an in-company training, the length of the course is 10 hours, so it's not so big. And the online course is more or less the same. If you follow step by step, you take more or less 10 hours. So to learn the base of the language, the basics of the language is very easy. And then to master it, it's like any other language. You probably never finish mastering a language because there are always things to improve on them. But that transition from Java to Kotlin can be done in a low amount of time if you use the right tools. But becoming an Android developer from start without knowing anything about Android, it requires quite more time, because learning about the framework is probably the most complicated part, and understanding all the weird things like fragments, like cycles, all the things we fight with every day and that we know, that's the most complex part of learning Android. And I don't know, it depends on how much time you can use for that, but it can go from the very basics, maybe 3 months or something like that, to years so to become an expert. Probably nobody is an expert in the Android platform, only in the things that they use in their day-to-day work.
And I think the way of development has been changed a lot in Android, because now they have like better documentation, they have better libraries and packages to start with. I mean, it's become very easy at least to start for people, because now they have these navigation components, the architecture components, and all those stuff. Even the room So I personally think if you are following that particular path, which they are like they're saying something called Jetpack, then maybe it's not that difficult right now, because I still remember that time when we used to struggle a lot with life cycles. I never understood life cycle, to be honest, that much at least, which I can say that I know everything about life cycles. That's never gonna be true for me because every time I find something very new. So moving to next question. It's by Abhishek and Rahul Kharapkar. So it's like, what's the scope of Kotlin? Because in industries we don't know what language has been used more, like Java or Kotlin. And in small cities, people are still preferring Java. Even the jobs are more of Java than Kotlin. So should we move to Kotlin? So that's the question.
Yeah, again, if you are an Android developer, I wouldn't think much about it, at least to be prepared for the future. Maybe some companies are moving slower, but in the end, they will need to adapt it at some point, because there are some libraries, for instance, the Jetpack Compose, as you mentioned, that are not being, you wouldn't be able to use it on Java. So and Android is moving to Kotlin, and Android developers should do it at some point too. In the rest of industries, it's not so evident because things are moving slower. For instance, if you ask me about backend, there are developers that are already using Kotlin, and it's gaining some traction, but still very far away from other technologies like Android, for instance. So there, you probably could live perfectly without Kotlin. But in the case of Android in particular, I don't think that in 1 or 2 years there will be many people still writing Java code. They will probably all move into Kotlin, or at least projects where Kotlin and Java coexist. But yeah, that's my opinion about it, and I can only recommend Android developers to learn Kotlin.
I totally agree with your opinion, to be honest. The last question, which I have from Burhanuddin Rashid, is Kotlin team going to provide common library support for Kotlin Native, like SQL Delete for database and HTTP for network requests, something like that? Or are they gonna provide something like file picking and camera as well? So do you have any idea about that?
In Kotlin Native, I don't think they are, at least at the moment, that they are putting too much effort in having these common libraries, because at the beginning I think they are thinking about it as a more core part of the apps, things that are the logic of your business or the logic of your application, but you could always abstract the real implementation. If you are using a good architecture, you would abstract the real implementation to and implement it on the modules specific to the platform. So it's not really necessary in that way. Some things like database that you mentioned, for instance, I think that SQL Delete already supports Kotlin Native, but this is coming from the creators of the libraries, not from Kotlin themselves. So if the platform gains some traction and people start using it, we'll see more libraries like that trying to become compatible with Kotlin Native in the future. But at the moment, I don't think they are doing anything special regarding that.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay, so thank you so much for answering all these questions. We have one more step to go, where you have to answer 10 questions in 1 word. Okay, it's gonna be very quick. So should I start?
Yeah, let's see. 1 word is very few words.
Yeah, I mean, let's try it. I mean, I'm also trying it for the first time. Okay. So so Java or Kotlin?
Kotlin.
Okay, your one favorite library in Android?
That's a good one. Retrofit, maybe.
Retrofit. That's I love retrofit. Work or family first?
Family, of course.
That's great. Native Android or cross-platform like Flutter?
Native.
that was expected. Okay, video or book or blogs? What you will prefer? The first priority.
That's a good question, but nowadays probably video.
Okay. Your best interest apart from the coding or the tech stuff. One best interest or something which you like.
Entrepreneurship.
That's interesting. Okay. Choose one of the best among these: IntelliJ or Android Studio or VS Code.
Well, I would say that in Android development, Android Studio.
Okay, that's the only option we have actually. But
Well,
what's your opinion about VS Code? that I'll ask later. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I haven't used Visual Studio too much, but from the little that I used it, when I wrote some Ruby and all that, it was perfectly good to use. It's very nice and very simple, but I haven't used it for big projects, so I can say.
That's fine. Okay, your favorite game?
Nowadays, probably Dragon Ball Fighters.
That's interesting. Again, what will you prefer? LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Gmail, or anything else?
Let's say Twitter.
Twitter. So basically, because I'm asking this because people are gonna contact you for sure after this interview. So be ready for that. Okay, so you have to give the one more questions answer. So how was your experience on this channel? And it is not going to be one word for sure. So yeah.
Well, yeah, really great. A bit different from the interviews I'm used to have. So very happy to have it, and I hope it helps your community.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Antonio, for joining with us, and it's really been a pleasure having you here. And I'm sure that people are gonna learn a lot from this particular video, as well as I would like you to tell more about your free training courses and other courses, because I have personally I have personally read your book, and I know that it's great, and I will definitely recommend to anyone. But tell us more about your training courses.
Yeah, for the ones that want to start for free to learn Kotlin, if they are Android developers already and want to move from Java to Kotlin, I have a free training that you can, if you want, leave the link in the comments or in the YouTube video, so that anyone that wants to join can do it for free.
Definitely.
And then I have the book that you mentioned and an online course that I do. I provide a certificate because it's a certified training by JetBrains, because of what we talked before. So that's probably the fastest way to learn Kotlin. But anyway, to start, what I recommend is taking a look at the training and then decide whether they want to go forward or they have enough with that.
Okay, so that's I'll provide the links in the description for the free training course, as well as the entire course material. So thank you again for joining here on MTech Viral, and it was really a pleasure talking to you, and all the very best for your future and all the courses you are doing. That's really great for people like who really want to learn from the online content. And maybe I'll get in touch with you again for a lot of questions, because they are gonna come. So
awesome, no problem. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be here, and I hope it helps your visitors to learn more about Kotlin and give the steps to move away from Java and start using Kotlin on their Android development.
Thanks so much. Okay, I'll see you maybe in the next video, guys. So stay tuned.